Wes and Ted's Excellent Conversation, a podcast about teaching, learning, and anything else that pops into Wes and Ted's heads. Ted Dorsey, are you ready to roll into this thing?
Wes, Carol, I'm ready to roll into this thing.
Oh my God!
Should we?
Can I just tell you what? It's been a tough day for us, but we've made it happen.
I know.
Good for us.
And in this sort of like, sidebar, let's share a little bit about ourselves in order to become friends with our listeners. I lost my cat for a minute. I lost my kitty cat.
I know that's rough.
And he never goes missing, and he's not really a wanderer. And but he wandered.
But in the house, didn't get out.
Yeah, I mean, I searched the house carefully enough where I was like, he is not in the house, and we brought out treats and everything, you know what I mean? Like this cat is very predictable, and this cat was not being very predictable. So that was the kind of the scary thing, I think.
Got it. Yeah. Fair enough.
And poor Matt, my husband he was upset. He loves this little cat.
I can imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I love the cat too, obviously, but
that's good. Does this cat have a name?
This is Max.
Max.
Max is short for Maximum Kitty. And the other cat is TK, and TK is short for Total Kitty.
Total Kitty. I was going to go with telekinesis, but I guess your name is better.
Yeah. There's a lot of depth and subtlety to the names, but I'm not going to get into it. So I'm just we'll leave it there, and we'll save that for another episode.
Good. Okay, that's all good. I thought maybe today we would focus on what works best. The tools. Mm-hmm. Let's see. We have some notes here. The tools, technological and otherwise, that can help students get ahead. What do you think of that? Still seem like a good thing to talk about?
That feels good to me. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so interesting. I was thinking about myself and my relationship to this topic in general,
me too.
Which is really, and I think we all ought to ask that question.
Totally.
I think weirdly, I'm someone who grew up on technology. And I've told this story before, and I don't know if I've told it on this podcast, but I was going home in kindergarten on the bus, and I said to this girl who didn't really like me, but that's fine. I was like, when I get home, I'm going to play on the computer. And she's like, computer? What's that? So that's how long I've been in the technology game,
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. But the weird thing I've noticed about myself is that I'm actually, I'm a little bit of a Luddite, you know what I mean? The Luddites wanted to destroy the new technology and go back to the old technology. I just find myself a little bit resistant to adopting new platforms, you know what I mean? And every time I hear about the new greatest thing that I don't have, I'm inherently skeptical of it. And resistant to trying it, really. So it's kind of an interesting perspective. It's I guess it's just that's the part of the problem of being in your 40s, is that's what happens to you. I wonder, how do you feel? How do you feel about if someone presents you with say a new organizational tool or a new piece of software or a new app or something like that? What's your initial reaction? Are you excited?
Oh, good question. So, oh boy, didn't anticipate that question. It's so good though. So there's a buddy of mine, Nate, who is super into whatever the new hotness, right? Whatever the new tool is.
Early adopter.
Oh my goodness, yes. And he's just got this real enthusiasm around it, and I respect the enthusiasm. The thing that gets me though is that when the new thing really is new, it's great to be on the leading edge and really learn from it. But so often the new thing is just an old thing that's been reskinned, and now it's let me just learn a whole new way of interacting with this basically same thing, right? There's you really have to be vigilant, right, when it comes to new stuff. By all means, I'm excited to see the new thing, but if I just jump straight in, I'm going to spend my morning configuring the new thing instead of getting anything done. You know what I mean?
Just one morning? To me, it's that's going to take. You know what I mean? One morning to get it set up, and then a month to adapt. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what about Cal Newport? Right? Just wrote a book, I guess last year, Digital Minimalism, I think it's called. Okay. I'm halfway through it. It's a really good read though, cool. And it makes a really good point of look, if you really know what it is you're out to do, right? There are going to be some tools in the world that will help you do it, but they're going to be few and far between.
Right.
By and large, everything else is distraction. Do you really need this thing to help you? Sometimes the answer is yes, but more often the answer is no, it's just a toy. You know what I mean? So really being careful about what tools you allow into your life, and then being really aggressive about, okay, I'm going to configure them to within an inch of their lives so that they really do what I want them to do, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's super common to have like, I do this with games on my phone, right? Like I open up a game and it's like, okay, I want to have the experience that the game is going to present to me.
Right.
So like, okay, hit me with whatever and I'll learn whatever I need to learn in order to enjoy the experience that the game designer has created for me. That's totally fine. But when it comes to like my calendar, it's like, no. I've got a way I want this to work. And you will work my way or else I will pick a new tool, right?
That's funny. I want to share a thought on that. I had another thought that I was ready to go with, but
Sure.
this is actually maybe even more interesting. I don't know. I've been pitched several times over the years by another tutoring company who has created like the ultimate tutoring platform. Okay.
Oh, you too. I bet it's not even the same company, but yes, I've had that experience from a number of different vendors, some of whom are tutoring companies, some of whom are tutor companies, suppliers, and yeah, go on.
So suppose there's like a half dozen of those, that you and I have seen over the years, and they're all sort of, they're all different products. Well, they're also all different from each other and actually unique to the person who created them. And they're all designed to fit perfectly the needs of the person who made them,
Right.
And some of the features that they propose, I look at the features and I'm like, I don't need that. You know what I mean? I can tell that it's very important to them that they have that. And it's like, oh no, no, we use, I don't know, Google Docs for that, whatever it is, some other solution or Zoom or something like that. But it's just funny how I think a lot of tools are sort of, it's about how you use them, right? It's about like how you actually make use of them. And the tool itself doesn't have that much inherent value,
Right. Well, and the thing that makes it tricky, right, is if you're doing the same old work on a new tool,
right,
it can feel exciting. Like you get that dopamine hit of like, ooh, I'm making progress here. Like I'm learning this new thing. And like your dopamine system doesn't care whether you're getting a hit from doing the thing that's supposed to be done or learning a new way to do it that's fundamentally no better.
Right. That's so, yeah.
Okay.
That's funny.
Every time I switch like to-do list products or whatever, I have like, yeah, I mean, it takes some time to get used to it, right? But there's also this like, ooh, I've learned a new thing. And it's like, I haven't learned a new thing worth learning.
That's funny. I need to think about that now. I need to think about my relationship with dopamine. Like, where's mine coming from? Because I hate switching platforms. I do not like that at all. I don't get, you know what I mean? I get zero positive thrill from that.
Well, when you're coming up to speed and you're like, oh, I got it to do what I want it to do, like you get that natural hit, right? And just for anyone following along who isn't sort of hip to the shorthand, right? Dopamine is the neurotransmitter that, oh God, now I'm going to say this and like neuropsychologists are going to be like, oh no, you're totally wrong.
I hope you're right.
Layman's terms, right? Dopamine is the thing that gives you a jolt whenever something good happens to you, right? Like, oh, I learned the new thing, or I accomplished the thing I set out to do, or I finished the level on the video game, or, I checked the box, right? Anyone who has ever put something on a to-do list that's already done for the purpose of checking the box knows what a dopamine hit feels like, because that's what it is. And obviously there are some unsavory ways to get dopamine hits that are artificial, that are bad for you, right? There are certain, I'm sure illicit drugs or whatever that will, just bypass all the activity and go straight to the dopamine receptor. Mm-hmm. That can be a problem. But the idea here is that you want to manage your own dopamine loop, right? You want to organize things such that it's easy for you to get that hit of accomplishment, but only when you're actually accomplishing something.
That's so interesting. This starts to get at like the question of like, what are we doing? What is the purpose of all of of all of this? Is it just to get the dopamine hit? Or are we actually are the dopamine hits steps along the path to a higher goal?
Well, okay, but all right. So different traditions have different analogies for this, but imagine that you are the monkey riding on top of the elephant.
Okay.
Right? The monkey in this analogy is, your will and your desire to affect change in the world, do whatever it is you want to do. Okay, whatever. The elephant is the rest of your mind. It's your collection of habits and proclivities and frameworks and automatic reactions and blah, 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 right? The fact is that we always fall into this thinking of like, well, I'm the master of my destiny, and if I wish to do something, I'll just go do it. And, to which my response is, when was the last time you ate Brussels sprouts? Like, they're good for you, and yet you're not eating them. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So some of your automatic impulses are, they're on autopilot, and we have this incorrect perception, right, that we can just jump in there and override the autopilot anytime we want, as much as we want. And the fact is, we don't have that much attention to spare. We don't have that much willpower. We don't have that much direct control. The best we can do is guide the elephant in little ways, right? And just trust that we're going to get more or less where we're trying to go. So when you ask the question, well, what are we doing, right? It's like, okay, in my analogy, that's a question for the monkey. What are you trying to do, right? And the fact that the dopamine loop is a thing you need to manage is all about managing the elephant. Like, you're riding on the back of the elephant and you are going to go where the elephant points you, but you have some limited control over what the elephant does, and managing your own dopamine loop is a way to get the elephant to do what the monkey says.
I agree with that perspective, and I think this actually is relevant to our conversation, but I think one
Sure.
issue is, like, who is the monkey? You know what I mean? Or, like, what governs the monkey? Because I think sometimes people actually do start to lose the focus on the ultimate goal. You know what I mean? And the goal might become, you know, something like getting the dopamine hit from accomplishing a task, which is a good thing, but that could also lead to, like, not following the long-term goal, you know? Another one could be like, well, let me just throw one more in. Like, another one would be like,
Sure.
you know, like being a leader of a team, you know, and like that could be the ultimate goal, and that could actually service a project or a product. But I think my point is, like, that would be a different monkey. You know, it's a different monkey riding on that elephant.
Okay, fair enough. So let's bring it back to the purported topic of our talk, right? So you're a high school student. You are doing some stuff in various classes. You're trying to get certain grades. You're trying to get into college and so on. We can frame it in these same terms, I think, really usefully by saying, look, the big picture goal is you are trying to have a comfortable and fulfilling life. Maybe not even comfortable. Maybe you're trying to have a challenging life, but you're trying to have a fulfilled life. All right, whatever that may mean for you, right? For some people, it's like, look, I want to own these physical objects. For some people, it's like, I want to make this change in the world. You know, it's I want to be safe to have a loving family. You know, whatever it is, right? Whatever combination. But let's just stipulate that's what the monkey's after, right? We're trying to build a life worth living.
Yeah, I mean that's my go ahead. That's my condition, is basically like, you know, what if we lose sight of that? You know what I mean? Like, what if the
I mean, let's put it front and center, right? Our goal here is to have a good life, whatever that may mean for us, and we get to define what it means to have a good life. But I think part of what we're saying here, we're safe stipulating. Look, part of having a good life is having security, safety, and some leverage, right? Some agency in the world to do what we want. And the way that we often frame this around high school students is, you know, look, I want you to have a safety net. I want you to have a comfortable job. I want doors to be open for you, right? These are the words that we as service providers and as parents tend to use, right? When what we're saying is, viewed in another way, is, look, I don't want my kid to be in danger. I don't want my kid to starve, and I don't want my kid to be railroaded into spending his or her days doing something he or she doesn't want to do, right? We want to have doors open. We want to have safety, security, all this kind of stuff. And so a common shorthand is, look, if you do well in high school, then you do well in college, and then you get a good job, and then blah, 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 blah. Now, obviously, that's been being turned on its head increasingly for a long time now, and it's sort of sharply being turned on its head now. But it doesn't change the underlying framework of, there are certain things you can do today that are likely to lead to a better future.
Right.
Whether that happens through good grades in high school, whether it happens through college or a good job or whatever, right? Like, it may very well be that being a YouTube influencer is the way you're going to do it. It may be that, who knows, right? I'm not to say. But I'm just saying that the kinds of stuff we're talking about here, we're going to frame it in terms of, get into a good college, blah, blah, blah. But it's bigger than that, right? Like, what we're going to talk about isn't just about getting into college. It's about, these are good arrows to have in your quiver if you want to have a good life, for a very broad definition of what good life could mean.
Yeah, and so I think we should probably get at that a little bit. You know what I mean? Think about the skills
totally.
that these tools are trying to build. You know what I mean? And see how effectively they can do it for us. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's do this. Let's we've been really zoomed out. Let's zoom way in on sort of a typical 2005, let's say, high school student, right? And I'm just saying that because I'm trying to get, again, there's been a lot of evolution recently questioning the value of college and so on. Let's just start by taking the position of, like, okay, we accept a priori that college is a valuable thing, that's the path to success. Let's look at some specific tools that help there. And then we can broaden the lens and talk about, okay, as we sort of let go of that assumption, does our tool set change and, all that kind of good stuff. Does that seem okay?
Sure. Yeah, I'm into it. So are we
Cool.
Are we going sort of pre-tech? I mean, are we starting with the sort of like
I shouldn't have said 2005. I didn't mean it in the sense of like pre-tech, although I think that would be an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
I meant it more in the sense of like, look, let's just assume that our goal here is to get into a great college and to get all the standard benefits, whatever that may mean, of a great college, just because it helps us anchor, because we have to talk about a particular scenario. Let's talk about that scenario first, and then we can broaden it out and look at different scenarios.
So let's start with, since we're talking about learning tools, we're going to talk about different types and ones that are meant to help you accomplish specific goals, right? So one really common and popular one that's been, trying to accomplish a goal that people have been trying to accomplish for all of human history, as far as I'm concerned, is like our tools for memorization.
Okay, great. Super specific.
The one that is the most popular, I'd say, is Quizlet, which gives people a chance to make their own decks of flashcards. They can actually borrow decks of flashcards from other people. So, you can go into Quizlet.com and search AP statistics, and there will be probably like 100 lists, maybe more than that, of terms people have put together. And then there are reviews, and you can find the best one, and you can study from someone else's list, and basically build your AP stats vocabulary. I
have a number of beefs with Quizlet, but setting that aside for a second, I think that the thing that you're really pointing out here is that flashcards in general are a helpful tool for memorization.
Right.
Quizlet is an implementation of flashcards, and it's an implementation that comes with the extremely big benefit of there are decks of flashcards other people have already made that are custom tailored for an experience that is very similar to one you're having.
Yeah.
Like they made a flash deck for their AP stats class. Guess what? Your AP stats class needs the same deck, more or less.
It does. It should. Yeah.
And even if you modify it, even if you say, card 47 could be improved in this way, like still, it's way easier to improve card 47 than to write a whole new stack.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that it's hugely beneficial to have an app like Quizlet to go out to the net and say, I want to do well in AP stats. Internet, what do you have for me?
But only to save that time. You know what I mean? But only to save the time of the of making your own deck. You know what I mean? You still have to study the flashcards.
Well, to play devil's advocate, right? I think there are a lot of people out there, and in fact, some on my team who would say, no, you should make your own deck because a lot of the benefit comes from making your own deck. And I mean,
some does.
Yeah, that's true. And yet, right? Like, if I want to be better at AP stats in 30 minutes, the only path for me is to load up a Quizlet deck from the internet and come close to committing it to memory in 30 minutes, and then I've got more than I had.
Right.
Yes, making my own deck is better, but it depends on your time frame.
Right, totally. And then and there are ways to learn things in the short term and ways to learn things in the long term, and that is clearly that would be a short-term strategy. You could use it for a long-term memorization tool as well. You just have to be a little bit more sort of consistent with it.
Well, another thing about Quizlet that I think is really important to touch on is that, like, there's the specific tool, then there's sort of the broader thing going on, flashcards. Yeah. And then sort of one layer out from that is just habits in general. The thing about Quizlet is it kind of supports all three, right? When you download Quizlet and you use Quizlet, you're automatically using flashcards, even if you don't have index cards in a box at your desk or whatever. But the other thing is that if you want to get good value out of Quizlet, you got to be hitting it once or twice a day. Yeah. And that means you got to be like, okay, the first thing I do when I'm eating breakfast is I do Quizlet for 2 minutes, right? And like getting used to doing that takes some work, right? Mm-hmm. It takes, I don't know, a week, a month, whatever it takes before that's like an automatic thing.
Well, this is...
But all of us...
This is jumping ahead maybe a little bit, but I just can't help myself. I think some people think of these tools as like the answer to their problems. You know what I mean? Like the solution to education, right? Like that if you have the right tool, you're going to do well in school. You know what I mean? But it's just a tool, right? And every tool needs a hand behind it, right? And every hand needs a will behind that, basically, to say, I'm going to use this tool to accomplish something. So I think it's that's an interesting perspective to have out of the gates. Is basically like, it's not the tool, I mean, it's the tool, but the tool is literally every single tool is worth 0 to you if you don't use it.
Well, that's very true, and it's worth most to you if you use it for its intended problem.
Right. Yeah.
So, for example, right, I'm learning a foreign language. My my sister-in-law, who speaks 5 languages, right, is watching me memorize with flashcards, and she like, that's not the most effective way to do that, right? And I'm like, look, I get it, right? You know what you're doing as far as this goes, and yet, I know myself well enough to know that a piece of the process requires me to be comfortable at a certain level, and I just know I'm not comfortable without a certain baseline vocabulary just committed to memory. So I totally grant that there's a faster way to do it, but I know that if I do it this way, I'll finish.
Also,
and if I do it your way, like, I'm going to be uncomfortable, and I don't want to be uncomfortable.
right,
you know?
right. So you're picking tools that fit the learner as well.
Yeah.
Also,
totally.
like the best way for you to learn Spanish probably would be to move to Ecuador. You know what I mean, and live in like isolation from any other English speakers for 3 months, and then guess what? You're going to speak Spanish, and that'd be really cool. It's just not convenient right now,
Right.
So you're using the tool that makes the most sense for you in that moment. And I wonder, I mean, what tool is she proposing? What's the alternative, and what are you not using?
Oh, she's a fan of immersion, and it's exactly to your point, right? If I move to Ecuador for 3 months, I will learn Spanish faster. But learning Spanish fast is not the only goal of my life,
Right?
And I mean, and now we can bring it back to students, right? You're trying to do well in school,
Right.
but like, it's not like it is the sole purpose of your existence for your time in school. Yeah, it's a high priority, but like, there's other stuff going on too, and you've got to sort of account for those things. Let me just make a quick point about Quizlet before we move on from that thing, which is that Quizlet ceased support for so-called spaced repetition a little while back. Spaced repetition is a validated technique where you can increase the effectiveness of flashcards immensely if the flashcards are smart enough to present themselves to you when you are on the cusp of forgetting what they say. Okay? So obviously this only works if you have like, a computer-mediated flashcard thing like Quizlet, right? But it's got to be keeping track of how long has it been since you last got this one right? How long has it been since you last got it wrong? Like, what's your history with this card? And then can match it against sort of the models that we know work for memory, blah, blah, blah. And then basically, the computer program can then just present you with the flashcards that it knows are highest value because you're about to forget them. And that whole about to forget them, that's just a bit of magic about the way the brain works, right? If you ask the brain a question just as it's about to forget the answer, that helps to lock it in permanently. So there's some other tools besides Quizlet that can be even more effective, but surprise, surprise, they take more time to set up and they're generally more fiddly. So like, again, there's the trade-off of like, what does the learner need at this moment for this purpose, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, and the tools that you're getting at there, in a way, I think you're also implying that one of the tools is psychology, is basically how does my brain work,
Totally.
And all the tech tools need to play to those strengths. You know what I mean? In order to be effective. And if they can, great. And if they can't, then what's the point?
Yeah, totally.
Do you have
and part of it is, it's really easy for us to say, well, geez, you're the tech companies, you figure out how brains work. And like, to some degree, that's right. That's why UX exists, right? Because like, we are primed to see things in a particular way. So like, present it in a way that makes it easy. And yet not all brains are equal, right? Like, my brain may require something yours doesn't. My personality may require something that's different for you. Like, I may be a freak for music or color, or I don't know, who knows?
Right.
There's 1,000 different things. But it's like, yeah, it's on the tech companies to make a good tool sort of broadly, but it's on you to know what you need. What problem are you trying to solve? How are you different from other people? Like, what are the things that are most important to you? And be mindful about, okay, is this tool going to get me where I'm trying to go in this moment, right?
Yeah. I mean, I just started thinking about like habits versus identity, and that there's sort of a difference there. That's an interesting one. And thinking back to the tutoring agency platforms that have been presented to me, that like, why did those people develop their platforms their way? Is it because their minds work in a specific way, or because they've developed habits? But then again, habits probably emerge from the way that your mind works. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And all those things are unique. So I'm sorry to like, I know it always like can't help but zoom out like right away on all these conversations, but the tools that'll work for everybody, like memorization, straightforward, short-term memorization, as you can accomplish on Quizlet, a half an hour before the test, right? Like, that's a universal skill, I'd say, or that's a, a kind of a universal goal. Will every other app sort of fail? Not every single one, but any app that's kind of targeted at a more specific skill that's not as universal be inherently like limited in its applicability, right? I mean, basically, how many apps are there to build that will benefit a bunch of people?
All right, I think I see where you're going with that. So let me identify some really common needs that students have,
Right.
and ways of getting those needs met in sort of an efficient manner.
Right.
You've already talked about one of them, Quizlet, and more broadly flashcards in general. But Quizlet's a perfectly reasonable stand-in for the idea of flashcards.
And can we label that category as something like novel learning or something like that? You know what I mean? Like taking on new information. Yeah.
We'll call it memorization. Yeah, for sure. So Quizlet is the place to start, right? In certain circumstances, you might swap it out for physical flashcards. If you need spaced repetition, you might swap it out for Anki, A-N-K-I. And in certain circumstances, you're better off using the so-called method of loci, L-O-C-I. The idea of so there's this thing, right? Where
is that what it is?
No, it's the idea that brains are especially evolved to memorize locations, and so like if you imagine yourself walking through a particular fantasy land, right, where like in the first room you see the first thing, like in it, I saw this great YouTube video just the other day of like someone purporting to help you memorize the periodic table, right? And they tell this story of like, imagine you're in this place and you see this thing and that connects to the first element, and then this other thing happens, right? And it turns out that these stories are totally, preposterous, but they're easy to remember because that's what the brain is set up for, right? So because we are good at stories that deal with location, if you hang certain data on the story, your brain will hang on to that much better than you think it would be able to, right? So in some, like the people who memorize 1,000 digits of pi, they're using that. They're not using flashcards, right? So in certain circumstances, that's another thing.
And that's about psychology as well, too. Yeah.
It totally is.
And also,
but Quizlet is...
And memorizing pi is pointless. I just want to go on the record and say that, like, if you're thinking about memorizing the digits of pi, you're doing it just for your own sort of like hobby, hobbyistic sort of sensibility. Like it's
as good a video game to play as any, but that's all it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, if you know 10 of the digits, then you know the circumference of the Earth to within like an eighth of an inch, like whatever. You're good. Okay, good. So calendars are another one. I want to throw out, and I was talking to a student just the other day, right, who's like, yeah, I don't use a calendar. And it was like, how do you function?
Well, you do. That person does, but just not not one external from their brain, You know
what? I'm not so sure. I mean, maybe you're right.
Well,
but
how does that person get to class on Tuesday? You know what I mean? Like they know where they're going on Tuesday.
I don't know. Maybe someone is reminding them.
Ugh. Yeah, possible. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Oh, no, you're right. You're right. That sounds terrible to me, but yeah, you're right. It's...
But like it happens, right? And we've all been there at some point in our lives. But I'm just saying, right? The rest of the world runs on the clock, runs on the calendar. If you don't have your obligations on a calendar, honestly, you're making your life harder for yourself in a lot of ways.
I think so too. Sooner
or later, you got to just get that stuff down, right? So when you get the syllabus, like for me, if you and I are having a conversation, it's like, look, we're going to record this podcast. It's like it goes in the calendar and no one else books me at that time. Like pretty straightforward stuff, right? Conflict management. Also, I know, like as a student, right? I know I do my best work in the morning, hypothetically, right? Then it's like, oh, well, all right. Now when I'm planning my homework, it's not just, do I have an hour to finish it? It's like, is this homework that requires me to be sharp? Because if so, that's a constraint of like where I'm going to put it. And if it's like, no, I just got to kind of bang this out and it's okay if I'm a little bit fuzzy, okay, maybe that's later in the afternoon or whatever when I'm a little bit groggy.
Right.
I mean, there's always trade-offs and being smart about it can help.
One thing I would say too is that, so calendar is like, it's to me, it's just absolutely just dead essential. I think that in recent years, this is not a criticism, but we've complicated calendars and we've actually turned them into communication devices as well. And I think communication is a huge category, a really important category that I want to get into standing on its own. But the like platforms like Asana or Slack, right? It's calendaring and it's discussion and it's project completion. You know what I mean? It's all these things. It's all like, it's an organizational tool that brings in communication and scheduling.
If I think something is going to get done by Friday at 1, then that thing is in my calendar as a thing to do
Right.
sometime before Friday at 1. And if it's not in my calendar, then I'll get it done by Friday isn't a promise. It's a wish sent out into the universe that may or may not come true.
Well,
You know what I mean?
not to mention that if you're in a corporate hierarchy and you tell me you're going to have it done by Friday at 1, and I can see that it'll be done then that is of some value to me. You know what I mean? And if we're a really good team, then like, you know, I'm looking at my watch at 12:58 being like, well, I guess he's less than 2 minutes away. You know what I mean? Like I can plan on that too. So, I can see the value in it in a hierarchy, you know, having some sort of shared calendar time.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't do calendar invites.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if I promise you something, I will put it into my calendar.
Right.
Like my calendar is sort of a reflection of my own commitments to myself, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't get to see my calendar and see when I'm doing the work for
Right.
you. I will tell you to your face that I'll be done Friday at 1 and I'll be done Friday at 1, and that's what you get.
If you get a message from me that says on my calendar, that means I'm going to see you. You know what I mean? That means that like if you've made the calendar, then you are on my calendar and there's nothing else conflicting with it. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm sharing that information, and it just takes as long as it takes for me to write the message on my calendar !
And I think we're framing this in terms of commitment to other people, but it's also commitment to yourself, right? As a student, it's commitment to your teacher. The homework is due Friday. Okay, I am committing to having it done at thus and such, whatever time class is on Friday. It's also a commitment to yourself. Like when I commit to have the homework done on Friday, what I'm really committing to is doing it at some time on Thursday or Wednesday or Tuesday, right? And not just in the sense of like, oh, I promise myself I'm going to get it done, but like identifying at what time between now and then, is this the thing I'm going to be doing to the exclusion of all other things?
Right.
What
do you think about to-do lists? Like, how do you feel about a to-do list and apps that support those things, or, do they belong on calendars? I mean, I'm a user. I definitely have, I've got one in my pocket right now, I believe, but.
So I go back and, I mean, my thinking on this has certainly evolved and it's not done evolving, but I'll say this. I know that a lot of extremely successful people do not keep to-do lists. They keep calendars only. If something's going to happen, they select when it's going to happen. And that's how they know what's going to happen. Increasingly, I find that a to-do list is helpful for two things for me. One of them is, okay, I know I want to get these 5 things done in the next 3 hours. I'm committing to getting them done in the next 3 hours. And in that sense, I could put a thing on my calendar that says, do the 5 things for those. I don't even bother to put it on the calendar because that much I can keep in my head, right? But then a to-do list is really helpful for like, what are the 5 things? And am I progressing? And like halfway through, have I checked 2 of them off and stuff like that, right? And you could do that on a notepad, but I've got an electronic tool that I use for that, and that's perfectly good. The other thing I do a to-do list for is a variation on David Allen's someday maybe list, right? I keep a to-do list not as promises I've made to myself for things that will happen in the future, but as things I have identified as likely being of value to accomplish, so that when I'm looking at my day or I'm looking at the next 10 minutes and it's like, geez, I'd like to get something useful done, I don't have to think of it afresh. I can look at the list and be like, oh, that one sounds fun. And I've already sort of pre-vetted it as a useful thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think, again, coming back to the student point of view, it's like, I know at the beginning of the school year, it's like there's a final project coming up for this class and there's a test for this class coming up in a couple weeks. And like, I have some idea of what's out there, right? If I've got those things on a list in some way, then at any moment I can say, you know what, this could happen, right? I feel like reading some history. And it's like, okay, well, why don't I read the history that relates to the stuff I know I got to get done this month?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I know we're going to be on chapter 3 next week. If I feel like sitting around and reading, that'd be a good thing to read.
Yeah, it's so interesting. History class, like that's a good one in terms of to-do lists, because when you get to college, they stop telling you how much to read each day. When you're in high school,
Sure.
It's like there's a Monday reading, a Tuesday reading, etc. And that's useful. That's actually a useful tool, I think, just to like segment it and break it up. And it's kind of more to-do listy, or I guess it's kind of calendar-y too. I'm going to read pages 7 to 13 today. And if I do that, and I keep doing that every single day, I will get through this whole chapter. When you get to the night before the test and you haven't started the chapter, you now have an impossible task. You know what I mean?
Oh, no, for sure.
Keep up.
Well, and as I say in my book, no. I really, but this, I actually do believe this, right? For any given task, a third of the effort is just breaking it apart into bite-sized chunks, right? Just thinking through what it really means to accomplish this.
Yeah.
Right? Even if it's just do the reading for tonight, there is some thought that goes into, okay, I got to find the book. I got to find a comfortable sitting position. I've got to not be hungry when I'm doing it. I mean, we take this stuff for granted, but like even for the simplest tasks, right? There's some thought that goes into, okay, how can I be successful here? And you're pointing out that when you get to college, like in high school, that 1/3 of the effort is provided for you. Okay, read these pages tonight. It's like, okay, well, how much do I need? Like, all right, I need to read the pages tonight. Whereas in college, it's like, okay, I got to read these books by November.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, I got to think about when I'm going to do this and breaking it down and doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it becomes more difficult for that reason. And that gets into a couple other things, which I'll mention really quickly. Gamification. I'm just going to throw out that word in general.
Like everyone does. Go ahead.
Yeah. Anytime you've broken something down into bite-sized chunks, put it on a list or something like that.
Give out badges.
Yeah, totally. Give out badges, right? That's what we talk about, the dopamine loop, right? I check the box of like, ooh, I read my page for tonight. Like whatever it takes to get you to do what you need to do, right? That's the monkey controlling the elephant. That's helpful any way you do it. And yes, there are apps that help you gamify stuff, but like at the end of the day, the most valuable tool is just the idea of doing it, right? Just the idea of, I'm going to break this stuff down. I think do not disturb mode on your phone and other related things. Oh my gosh, there was a great app. I guess I can name check it. We're not getting any money for this or anything like this, but there was an app that existed a while ago that I think is still around. They're probably competitors as well. It was called Vitamin R for Ritalin, I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
And what it would do is like you'd turn it on and you'd say, I want to do my whatever right now. And it would turn off all the other apps on your computer. And the only thing you could do for that length of time was that thing, right? And I thought that is the dumbest app in the world until I started using it. And I was like, this is the slyest, cleverest app. Because, it's like I've got nothing else to do but the thing I said I was going to do for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever it is.
I had an app like that called Freedom, and it basically did the same thing, disabled the internet. You know what I mean? While you were gone, it's like, this doesn't feel like freedom, actually. This feels like oppression.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And then I couldn't uninstall it. I couldn't figure out how to, it took me like a long time. It was in like a really sneaky place. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
One of my pieces of advice in terms of platforms is know thyself, right? Basically like, know what works for you, figure out what works for you, and then use that tool. So, mine, I mentioned this to you the other day, is I love listening to music with a tempo, but no lyrics. I cannot have any words. It's got to be like somewhat repetitive. In fact, kind of the more repetitive, the better. And in some ways, the longer, the better.
Sure.
And so I listen to like a lot of 20th century classical music, and I really do like that music too. I'm not just like standing on, being the most pretentious person ever. But
I mean, there's a reason they call trance music, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And like there's a work trance to go into that, like for me is that's totally. The most productive, sort of space where it's like, you lose track of the time. You know what I mean? Like it's not about time. And I set these playlists to be 2 hours long each, because 2 hours for me is the sort of window within which I can keep my brain energy really, really high. You know what I mean? And like it just starts to fade at the end of that. But if I do 2 hours of work cleanly, I'm going to be pretty happy. That's actually a day's work for me. I'll do other stuff too.
Sure.
It's like I can still fold the clothes and that sort of thing. But that's easy by comparison.
There's no question. When I'm firing on 4 cylinders,
right,
on all cylinders, I should say,
6 or 8,
I get more done in 3 hours than most people get done all day.
Right. No doubt.
But the trick is the rest of the time has to be kind of dialed in such a way that I can get 3 very high quality hours in. Like it's not like, oh, and yes, and I could do the work of 2 people by putting in 6 hours. It's like, no, if I put in those 3 hours, I'm drained for the day.
Oh, yeah.
Like I've gotten it done, but like I've got nothing left but to fold the clothes and to walk the dog and to do other, sort of low energy activities.
Totally. Yeah. Walk the dog is the perfect example. It's like, this is how much brain power I have left. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Or the dog walks me.
Exactly.
Like, whatever.
Yeah.
We'll make it around the block. A couple other things. I think I'll just throw out, right? Breaks are an important thing. I'll throw out the idea of unscheduling, and that to me, maybe there's some experts who are going to say this is wrong, but to me what that connotes is making the conscious decision about what you do in your default time. So for some people, it's like, well, I got to do this then, and this then. and the rest of the time I can just watch Netflix. For other people, it's like I'm going to do this then, this then, this then, and the rest of the time I'm working. All right. So for the first kind of person, it's like I've got these assignments and then I can be on break. For the second type of person, it's like I'm going to walk the dog, I'm going to catch up on this episode of Netflix, and the rest of the time I'm busy studying.
Mm-hmm. Wait,
okay?
so is it?
So that's
yeah, just, yeah. Are they the reverse of each other?
yeah, more or less.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm saying is that it pays to spend 5 minutes thinking about, okay, what does my default time look like?
Yeah.
Right. Because there was a time when, like, you know, presumably you studied 8 hours a day. There was the 40-hour work week, all that kind of good stuff. But those days are long past. Right. And so it's like you're awake for whatever it is, 120 hours a week. So it's like, figure out what your default stance is, you know, because I think for most of us, our default stance is pull out our phone and, like, you know, rage scroll or something. Right. And it's like, pick a better default, man. Like, you know what you do when you're not doing anything.
I had a funny moment the other day. I had a bunch of errands to run, and I kind of I didn't overschedule myself, but I scheduled myself very full. And I got home from, just knocking out a bunch of stuff, from stupid to useful, and I got home and it was like 3:15 p.m. I think, and I had a 4:00 student. And I was like, great, time to, breathe and do what I normally do. And I just pulled up a Google Chrome window and went to ESPN.com, which is like the website I've gone to more than I've gone to any other website by a factor of, I don't know, 50 probably. And after maybe 25 minutes of that, I was like, oh, like this is when I'm not productive. It's like when I'm in this sort of like weird default mode where there isn't a plan and there isn't something to do. I just do this. And it didn't feel any like better or worse than the rest of my day. It just was worse. It just was less productive. So,
and to be like, here's a subtlety I think a lot of people miss on this point. It's not that recreation is bad. Recreation is super vital. Right. It's just you have to be mindful about it. Yeah. Like, if watching ESPN recharges you, go with God, my son. Mm-hmm. But if ESPN is just kind of like meh time for you, yeah, it's like, quit doing that, right? Like, set yourself up for success by doing something that you know is going to be good for you. Like, take a nap, or have a healthy snack, or drink water, or walk around the block, or meditate, or, or maybe it is watch ESPN. I don't know. Right. I'm just saying, be mindful about it.
But I get your point. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
So we've talked about, learning tools, memorization tools. We've talked about scheduling. Sure. I want to throw in communication as another tool, as another kind of category of tools. And it's funny because I think that we had initially meant to talk about, like, I had initially meant to get really specific and get into a bunch of like apps and platforms and things like that and be like, but you simply must use this one. And I fell off that so fast, you know what I mean? Like I basically lost
in preparing for this conversation.
Yeah, as soon as because I don't have platforms that I'm not in love with platforms, and I think that's true of me in general, but I think it's also true of me in this conversation where I'm trying to love platforms. That it's hard for me to get very, very excited about anything that does a simple task. Because the task is simple and it's just a matter of doing it. So like for me, for communication, my tool is email. And sometimes my tool is text message, and there have been a few funny times when I'm literally with the same person having a text message conversation and an email conversation. And they're actually broken up by purpose and category. You know what I mean?
I get that.
But
it's part of why I like Slack, is that it sort of categorizes stuff and,
well, and there are tools that do some of that work for you that are great. Like, Uma, who works in my office, uses Daylight for her, all of her emails. And so basically everything that goes to and from a particular client that mentions a particular client goes in that folder. That's all it does. It's so simple, but it's all there. Mm-hmm. That's an organizational tool. It's an organizational tool that helps you communicate better and, do better work on the side.
Well, there's a granddaddy of sort of simple tools that help as far as I'm concerned. And again, I don't mean to plug any particular products, but I got to say, Google Docs, right? Google Drive falls into that category for me. And a similar thing in that category is stuff like Notability and other note-taking apps.
Right.
But what I'm Evernote is another
Yeah.
good category. What I'm saying is that there are some great tools out there that we completely take for granted these days that are all about saving us from categorization. That's really what these tools are about, right? I write a thing down. I know it's important. I know it fits into my mental schema of how it's important. This relates to student Johnny, right? This relates to my family. This relates to taxes, whatever it may be, right? But I don't need to put that context in there. I write the note, whatever it may be. I throw it into the tool because I know that later when I say to myself, oh, I'd really like to see that thing again, I can search for it and find it.
Right. Yep.
Right.
And that's the value of digital too, right? Is that like it's all,
Exactly.
Yeah. It's sorted for you.
Yeah. And I think that that's part of the reason why a to-do list for me is just sort of a wish list instead of a set of commitments, is that at any time I can just search through my list of to-do stuff and pick one that sounds good.
Right. It's like I've got 15 minutes. What would take 15 minutes to accomplish?
Totally. No, I think there's a lot there.
I think I'm going to come back to my sort of Luddite position here.
Okay.
So yeah. In terms of what we use to get done what we need to get done, right? Like,
Sure.
well, let me tell you a quick story. So Evernote is that PDF software, or it's like a way of organizing your thoughts and keeping your like annotations in one location, all your files in one location, and you can basically mark on a document.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I don't use Evernote, but yeah, that's right. And I think it OCRs kind of automatically in the cloud or some such thing. So you throw a bunch of even handwritten notes in there, and it can sort of do a reasonable job of reading it and figuring out what it is and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was using that in grad school. It was 2011, 2012, and I had all my PDF reading. All the readings were on PDF. That's a new thing. You don't have to buy those course packs anymore, which is nice. You know what I mean? Like the old $60 stack of photocopies, with the
good old
the
days.
black curly plastic bindings. Yeah.
Totally.
So it was useful, and I could read on the bus, and I could bring home. I'd have all my readings for the entire quarter. All at the ready. So. I liked it. I did tons of annotation in there. The problem came when I reorganized my files, and I basically moved my fall coursework to it was my current quarter's work, and then I moved it to the fall quarter instead. Like, you know what I mean? I picked up the files and moved them elsewhere, and then basically re-uploaded them to the app. Like it was user error on my part, because I should not have basically re-uploaded them.
What bad thing happened?
I lost all my annotations.
Did you lose your annotations? Oh yeah, that's bad.
And so I had like comprehensive exams, at the end of the year, and it was like, and I don't have any of my notes from the fall.
I'm going to say something really heretical.
Okay.
I think every time that we feel unmotivated to do something, or every time we feel confused about the thing we've said we're going to do, it's because we haven't done enough work thinking about why we're doing the thing and what the thing is. Okay? And what I want to suggest is that what you're describing here is kind of the computer version of the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
Losing the annotations is losing all the I shouldn't say metadata because that has a very specific meaning, right? But like, if you lose the annotations, right, what are you losing? You're not losing the PDF, but you're losing your thoughts about the PDF.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a big loss.
Yeah.
And, what happens as a result? Well, yeah, I've still got the PDF. I've got the data, but it's not organized in a way that makes sense to my brain.
Exactly.
That layer between the raw information and like what I need to make it be valuable intelligence for me is that stuff, the annotations and stuff. And I argue that that's not just about computer tools. That's about everything we touch. Like every time you have a new experience, every time you have a new piece of information, your brain has to do a certain amount of work to contextualize it so that it fits into everything else that's going on there in a sensible way. And I would say that anyone who really spends time doing that has a better functioning brain, because the stuff is just filed better. And like, I know, I don't know what my brain is doing. I don't know how it's filed. I just know that there are certain things that are like facts that are at my fingertips and methods that are easy to accomplish. And there are other things that just feel like slogging through molasses. And I know that's why. And the same is true for these tools, right? If you've picked the right tool and you've organized the heck out of it and like gotten the preferences just so, and you're used to using it, it feels frictionless.
Yeah. And you probably get a dopamine hit from that too. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. Are you kidding? Yeah. It's like, man, I'm on top of the world. I'm just banging this out. But if you haven't done all those things and you feel like you're slogging through molasses, guess what? Step back from what you're trying to get done and fix your darn tools.
Yeah.
Right? Whether those are the apps on your phone or your mental assumptions about how you should be doing it, or your schedule or whatever. So I tell you what, look, we've had a really broad discussion, but let me zoom it back in, right? I'm a student of Tutor Ted. I'm interested in acing the ACT, right? And I would like to do it in April, and it's October. Like, how am I going to do that? Right? I got to imagine that when I work with the master Ted Dorsey, he's going to tell me, look, Wes, I've looked at your practice test and I've determined that you need to, here are 15 areas where you need to be stronger, right? 10 of them are things you need to memorize, and 5 of them are technique and pacing. I mean, am I totally off base? Or
No,
is
I mean, that's fine.
The
the plan would be, what you're pointing out is the plan would be unique for each of the students,
Yeah, of course it would. But like, it falls into certain categories, right? There's stuff that I need to learn. There's stuff that I need to like remember that I used to know. And then there's certain techniques I need to learn, or certain mindsets I need to adopt that are different, that are not, I'm just not used to using them because I'm not used to taking this test. Great. So I learn all these things, and it's like, great, I've got however many, 1, 2, 3, 4 months to learn this stuff, right? And then we begin a process of, okay, great, you're going to teach me some stuff. I'm going to go off and research some stuff and learn it more. Then I'm going to take these new bits of knowledge and skill, and I'm going to apply them to practice questions and see if I can do it reasonably frictionlessly. And then there's going to come a point at which I'm going to take a practice test to see if I can do it on the fly. And then I'm going to meet with you again, and you're going to say, okay, here's the place where you haven't really taken a straight line path. You should actually, this would have been easier if you'd practiced this piece more, but you're doing this piece correctly. Like, it's complicated, but it's not rocket science, right? There's a lot of different pieces, but
I totally agree. And I mean, and I would say, and like, there's this vision of the future that at some point, and I'm sure this is true, but we're not there yet, that AI would be able to do all this stuff for us. You know what I mean? That basically, like, some other, like, robot would be able to read that situation and give the student the right advice for moving forward from where they are,
Well, okay, but so part of where I'm going with this is that, for example, spaced repetition is, in effect, AI helping you spend less time memorizing.
Right.
Okay? Because what is spaced repetition? It's having the card that you most need show up in front of you. Now, it's interesting that actually spaced repetition can be executed with index cards in a collection of small boxes that you can be your own AI for this. You don't actually need a computer to do spaced repetition, but you do need to follow a relatively complicated set of rules about, when I look at a card, where exactly do I put it and which box do I pick up next and stuff like that, right? Similarly, calendaring has some rudimentary AI built into it these days. Like, I can send you an email, right, that offers you meeting times to meet with me, where the AI has already pre-selected where I'm free, right? Or I'm sure that there exists a tool now, or soon will, where it's like, I want to meet with Ted, and it's like, great, the next time both of you have a free spot on your calendar is Thursday at noon, great, book it, right? So that kind of thing. So I absolutely agree that, like, AI is moving in on these things, but...
Is that AI, though? Is that, you know what I mean?
Well,
like the app that allows you to find a meeting time in common with other people. I can't even remember the name of it now, but I use it whenever we need to, schedule a fantasy football draft or something like that. Right.
Great.
Like, it's a tool, but it's not doing complex human thinking yet.
It's certainly not doing complex. Well, okay. So the big thing as of a few years ago, as far as I know, was sort of narrow AI, right? Getting computer programs to do a very narrowly defined thing, but do it well. Okay. As opposed to like Siri, let's say, or, Alexa or whatever, where it's just trying to be a very broad whatever. And it turns out that those things are most successful when they have a collection of narrow things that they know how to do. Right. The point I'm trying to lead to is computers are going to become better and better and better at doing pieces of this thing. But at least currently, if you don't understand the big picture of what you're trying to get done and how psychology can either help you or get in the way, these tools aren't going to help you very much. Right. But like, I know that when I'm stuck, I haven't thought through something well enough. So when I get stuck, I zoom out and look at what I'm trying to accomplish and try to explain it to an invisible person across the room, right?
Yeah.
And invariably I find like, oh, I don't really understand this thing I'm trying to get done. And it's like, great, now I'm unstuck. At least I know what the problem is, right? I need to ask them for more information. I got to break this down into pieces, whatever it may be, right?
I mean, that comes back to my, know thyself advice, which is like the easiest advice you can ever give somebody, but it's maybe the best too. And then use the platforms and the tools that'll help you be yourself. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And if we get back to Cal Newport's point, digital minimalism, right? One of the powers that you get if you know your own psychology is that you can tell the difference between an app that's trying to get yourself out of your own way versus an app that's trying to redirect you from what you want to get done to what it wants you to get done. Facebook is not, generally speaking, trying to help you through your day.
No, I believe it's not.
It's trying to get you to do what it wants you to do. You know what I mean? Like, it gives you the dopamine hit of connecting with another person or whatever, but like, at the end of the day, that's why it's a rabbit hole, right? You spent an hour and a half on Facebook. What do you have to show for it, right? You could have picked up the phone and called these people or whatever. But there are other tools where it's like, you know what? This tool actually helps me feel good about getting my stuff done. Okay, great. More power to you.
Yeah. Well, I think we leave it there. I mean, that's pretty good. I think that's a nice parting thought. Do you have any other kind of closing ideas about this, or is that the winner?
I feel like maybe we may have to like re-record this or have another episode about this so we can get sort of super detailed about this stuff. What I'm really psyched to do is to take a look at this and to make some comments in the comment section below that sort of says, hey, this is where we talk about Quizlet and here's where we talk about this other stuff, because as interesting as it is to get into this with you, I can imagine there's some people who are going to want to come to this, click to the place that's of interest and just go straight there. I'm hoping that some students will look at this and be like, oh, I never thought of using Quizlet. I never thought of like putting my stuff down on a calendar. I never thought of like searching on Google Drive or like whatever it may be.
20th century classical music, I mean, who knows?
Dude.
Yeah, it works for me.
I mean, I've already listened to the playlist that you very graciously lent me from your own Spotify, and I got to admit, work music is a real thing for sure. And I've known that, but like when I listen to yours, it's like, oh yeah, it's nice to have somebody else's take on this.
Nice, yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, that's very specific too. Yeah,
for sure.
No, I like that.
That's all good.
That'd be interesting to like. It'd be interesting to do a project like this like the year of the year of living biblically. There's like this kind of like new. Trope of basically like doing something for a year, and maybe this one would be the year of new apps or new platforms. Basically, like every week you have to live by an absolutely new platform and figure out how it works. That is a project that would be basically like a year in hell for me.
The reason that's no good for me is that I typically think of apps as extensions of my own brain. And and that's why they're so dangerous, right? Because if they're not actually listening to what I want them to do, then I wind up getting diverted. Yeah. But when they're working well, it's like, I don't want to change my brain out every week. Yeah. It's like that would be sad
to say goodbye to the new exoskeleton that you actually like.
Yeah, it's like it's working great. Yeah. I love it.
Good stuff, man. Let's maybe we'll get into some specific apps if y'all are interested in us talking about. Like we did get into some apps, but if you want us to go point by point, hey, we'll make a list and talk some pros, some cons, some features, some missing features.
Yeah. And I also think one of the things that might be interesting just to throw it out there is we've both had students who are particularly adept with certain tools. And I think that just by kind of mentally going through, we don't have to name the students in particular, but I'm just saying we probably each have a list of like, 12 or 15 students, each of whom typify mastery of a particular tool, and we could get into some of the pros and cons of getting really good at various things, and nice. I think that could be helpful too.
That's a good idea. Yeah. I'm thinking of someone right now. All right, saving it for next time.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Wes.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks for hanging with us. Click subscribe, ring the bell, tell a friend, leave a comment. You know the drill.